Thank you for listening to this episode of
Talk Line with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981. Please call us with your questions and comments at 212-769-1925.
Thanks for joining us.
Talk Line Network Radio, America's longest-running Jewish broadcast network, the voice of the Jewish community.
Welcome to the podcast. You are now tuned in to this episode of our podcast. Today we are going to interview some of the greatest and most influential minds in our field. And now, please welcome your host.
You're listening to Talk Line with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And we're back. One of the issues that I know requires a lot of thought, and we don't really pay enough attention to it, is halacha, Jewish law, when it comes to monetary issues. And tonight we have a special program that's sponsored by Righteous Helping. Righteous Helping, and what they do is for a community father that is hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt after his business dealings failed. He's struggling to survive with his wife and children, and we're in the process of trying to help him out. So now we have a very special guest, Rav Zusha Winner, a Rosh Hashiva Lubavitch. He's also a Dayan. He's written Svarim, including on Shchita and on marriage, not to equate the two by any chance. And he's an expert on dealing with monetary issues and Jewish law. Rav Winner, thank you for joining us.
Reb Zev, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for putting this together.
And thank you. And also, you're a Rav in Brighton Beach, so you have a full plate. So I know that people pay attention to kashrus and the millions of books and the dealings with other kinds of issues. But when it comes to money, you don't really see as much out there, right?
Yes, and the term you're using, this kosher money, and unfortunately people are asking shilas about kashrus and not enough shilas about money.
Very, very true. Now, with the summer season really upon us right now, so there's some interesting halachic issues dealing with summer. So, for example, many people, and I suspect this year is going to be a banner year for people going to bungalow colonies and renting summer homes, because after COVID and after a tough winter, dealing with all kinds of issues, people want to get away. So what happens if people make a reservation and they say, I'm going to book this colony, I'm going to book, you can say it's a hotel for a week or whatever it might be, and then all of a sudden they decide, you know what, I'm not coming. Is there any halachic ramifications if they say I cancel when the person who they were renting from was relying on them for parnasa, for income?
Very good question. And this happens all the time, and I've had such questions coming my way. In the Gemara, there's a discussion, and also in Choshen Mishpat, about this. Generally, if you want to make something binding in halacha, you have to put down a down payment or an initial payment to make it binding, what's called a kinyan. A kinyan is an act of acquisition that binds it. If you make a verbal agreement, so that's a different story. Halachically, a verbal agreement is not binding legally. Nevertheless, in the halacha is that if someone who makes a verbal commitment and then changes his mind is considered mechusrei amuna. A man, we label him as a person who lacks integrity. Mechusrei amuna is missing in his faith, and although legally he is not bound to do this, with exceptions we may bring up soon, but nevertheless, it's a person who lacks integrity. In fact, that's in Shulchan Aruch and in Gemara. The Alter Rebbe adds that a Yireh Shamayim, a God-fearing person, even if he committed himself in thought to another person in money matters, he should also follow through with that. So therefore, we have over here a very interesting situation that although legally, halachic legality, he's not bound necessarily if he didn't make a down payment. If the landlord didn't ask some initial payment to bind them, he's not bound. Nevertheless, there's some kind of a moral and ethical responsibility to follow through on his words. The term uses sheris. They bring a pasuk, sheris Yisrael lo yasu avla. Israel does not do wrong. They do not speak a lie. And this is the pulsing that's connected with Mechusrei Emunah. So it's a moral responsibility to follow through on a monetary commitment.
You're reminding me where you're supposed to, when you lend money, you're supposed to have witnesses to do so. And lots of times people lend money without witnesses. So it seems like we fall in the same category as what you're speaking about.
Well, the witnesses, and there it's more complicated because people forget, and it's a real theft issue. You have someone else's money. It's an illegal. It could lead up to an illegal ownership of money that really is not yours. Here it's an ethical commitment where morally you should do it, even though legally you can't. It's a concept which is interesting.
Now, you mentioned that in the case of where I'm renting a bungalow colony or a hotel room, well, is it commonplace to make a kinyan when you rent a hotel room? For a bungalow colony, maybe I can say, but for a hotel room?
Well, a kinyan doesn't necessarily mean, with a handkerchief like
Could
we
be a
do.
deposit too, right?
But a payment would be a binding kinyan, because we consider a rental. The term that the Gemara used, schidus liyoymoi memkeru, a rental for the period of the rental is like a purchase. It's like you bought it. It's like you bought it for the month or the weekend that you're renting. And the halacha is concerning a purchase of property or home. And similarly, by rental, if you give a partial payment, so that binds it, you bought it, it's yours already. So therefore, if the landlord is doing the right thing, or the hotel, and they say, listen, you got to put down money. So halachically, any amount of money that you put down, even a pruta, to bind it, then for that weekend or that week or that month, once you put down money, that's the kinyan. That brings finality and legally binds you to follow through on that deal. The issue which we mentioned before about Mechusrei Emunah is if it was just on words. It was an oral commitment. He made a reservation, says, okay, I'm going to hold it for you. Usually my friends or relatives, I'm going to hold it for you. And then a week, 2-3 weeks later, they change their mind. And there, it's not, although legally it's not binding, nevertheless, it's considered Mechusrei Emunah. I would point out something interesting to you,
Sure.
if I may.
Sure.
This idea is really something that is unique in Jewish law. Rav Herzog, who's the chief rabbi of the Rav Arashi in Eretz Yisrael, he was learned not only in halach, he was a big gaon, and he wrote Shalsut Shuvas Svarim, but he also studied law, and he wrote a book in English on comparative study of Jewish law. And an article that he wrote even before that in a journal of Jewish jurisprudence, he points something very unique in halacha, which is unique in Jewish law and not in other systems of law. In other systems of law, the judges or the courts deal with legality. So if legally you're not right, there's no case. In Gemara and in Choshen Mishpat, there's also issues of moral responsibility. For example, someone that does indirect damage to somebody or other situations, the Gemara says, Potter medine adam v'chay b'dinei shamayim. He doesn't have to, the courts are not going to force him to pay, but in order to come clean before heaven, he should pay. I would put that in. So Rav Herzog goes into the thing, he says there's no other system, because in Jewish law, it's connected to the word of Hashem. So the word of Hashem and the courts and the Dayanim also not only have to say what is the law and what you're legally required to do, but also what's morally responsible. And this would be such a case where there's only a verbal commitment and he canceled. So here the Gemara labels it.
So let me ask you, halachically speaking, I make a deposit for a hotel, bungalow colony for a month, I put money down and I cancel. Is the owner of the hotel, the bungalow, required to give back the money, or can he keep it halachically?
No, he could keep it, because really, once you put down money, that is already a kinyan on it. It's yours. Now, if you don't go through it and he rents it to somebody else, so then it'll cancel each other out. But really, once you put down money, halachically, it's a kinyan.
So here's the interesting question. I put money down, I'm making a kinyan. Let's say I put a credit card down. The credit card I can revoke. So even though I'm giving you the money, but I can still cancel it according to the credit card policy. How does that figure out in halakha?
That would be wrong. That would be wrong. Because the money came out already, and he got the money. So the kinyan was made. So you're bound, the renter is bound to follow through on that.
No, but the question I have is, it's a question.
No, you can do what you want to get your money back, but that would be wrong. It'll be halachically wrong.
No, but my question though is when you give money, I'm actually holding money. When I give a credit card, it's tenuous because I could cancel it. So I really don't have the money yet, even though officially I do, right? Because the credit card I can pull back and say I canceled within 30 days, whatever it might be. So according to American law, I might be legally, I might be on sound ground. How luckily it may not be. That's why I questioned what the kinyan is with a credit card.
So frankly, I don't know American law or New York State law. But it would seem to me that when you make a credit payment and it's already credited in that person's bank, so although the credit card company may remove that money because of a complaint or something else, but once money came, there will be a kinyan. You could be justified in changing your mind and taking back the money because it's not what they offered and it's mekachtos. That will be other issue.
What would happen if you're sick? If one is sick and cannot come?
Once a kinyan is made, it's a good argument. It's a good question. But technically, once a kinyan is made, a kinyan is made. And an obligation is made. Business is business. You can make it, listen, the landlord could be a mensch and make a deal with it, try to find another tenant, or you find them another tenant to take your place. It's a responsibility. Once you make a payment and you make a kinyan, it's your responsibility to follow through. Now, if you can't, so then you still have a responsibility.
We're with Rav Zusha Winner. He's Rosh Yeshiva Lubavitch. He's a Rav in Brighton Beach. He's written Svarim on Shchita, on marriage, and we're looking at the laws of business and how we can conduct itself, especially during the summer season when new challenges arise. So, Winner, we spoke about renting a bungalow or renting a hotel room for a period of time. What happens if a camp decides I want to hire counselors and I want to hire division heads, whatever the situation might be? Then the summer comes and I say, you know what? I have too much staff. So what are some of the halachas? What are some of the rules? Because here there may not be a kinyan because nobody's exchanging anything. What are the halachas if I decide to cancel a counselor or wherever the employee might be for the summertime? This could be true of any other situation as well, not just limited to summer.
Well, that's a very good question. And I see some situations where directors of camp really take advantage of the young boys and girls who already commit themselves to go to a certain camp. They don't really get paid what they deserve for the time that they give in to be counselors in these camps, and then a director changes their mind, their reneges on their commitment to hire them. So here we go to another area of halacha, which is also connected, and that is schiras poilim. You hire workers. So the Mishnah says that if you hired workers verbally, no commitment, no kinyan, and you said, come to work. So and whether the employer went back on his word or the employee goes back on their word, so the Mishnah says, "Ein lahem zel zeh ela tarumais." Tarumas means you're entitled to be upset with them. You're entitled to criticize them. Nevertheless, because there's no kinyan over here, if they would start working and they made a deal, so that beginning to work is considered like a kinyan in the other places. Nevertheless, the Sma brings that there would still be an issue also, even if they didn't make a kinyan, there would still be an issue of Mechusar Amona. The Sama compares this case of canceling or reneging on a hiring of a person, even without a kinyan. Since you verbally committed yourself to hire them, it would be the same as a purchase. When you bought something and you change your mind, and they would be considered Mechusar Amona, which means this is people of no integrity. And here you're talking now about a Meisid. You're talking about how some of them consider themselves non-for-profit, these camps, part of a yeshiva. And if a yeshiva, in Choshen Mishpat, there's a rule, a person could say, I only want to do the law. But in most of chinuch, educational institutions, yeshivas, they're supposed to consider themselves lifnim mishur sadin, to go beyond the law, to do the right thing beyond the law. So for a moisel chinuch, who is considered themselves representative of Torah education, etc., and they're labeled Mechusar Amuna, this is totally inappropriate. That's one point. Second point is that in the laws of hiring, if you told a person, come to me tomorrow and I'm going to hire you, or come to me next week, and that person could have committed himself to you only verbally, so as we said before, that's not a kinyan, it's not obligatory. Nevertheless, if because of that, they rejected an offer of a job because they gave their word. And now the employer changed his mind, and now they can't find a job. Here, halachically, they should pay. They don't have to pay full. Schar batola. There's a whole discussion of how much that is, but there should be monetary consequences that because of the verbal commitment, they didn't take a job and lost the opportunity of a job because they counted on the employer keeping his word. Here it makes it a responsibility money-wise. This same issue would also be, for example, in a hotel or a bungalow, the case that we mentioned before. They compare the two cases of Mishpin, the commentators, that if the person could have hired tenant, he said, well, we spoke before. He said, "I'm coming Shabbos Nachmu," or "I'm coming for the week, the last week of the August," and then the renter rejected people, and now the last minute he says canceled. And although legally, as we said before, there was no kinyan, it's all verbal, and maybe legally they don't have to, they're not bound, but okay, morally, but as a result of that, the landlord now has no tenant for Shabbos Nachmud, and like you said before, that's his parnasa.
And so the same thing would be if a hotel books a singer, and a week before Pesach or Shavuos, whatever it might be, they cancel the program.
So this is
out of a job because you couldn't.
So this is called, this over here. There's a discussion. When you cause indirect damage, this is called either garmi and groma, two forms of indirect damage, more direct, indirect, and more and less direct. There's some poskim who say this is garmi and you have to pay. That the landlord, like he said, you hire a singer, and then you let him down the last minute, and he loses an opportunity for a job. So poskim call this garmi, which is although you didn't break his window, you didn't steal from him money, and it's more indirect, but it's practically direct, verbally, and he should pay. Usually in these cases, the Bezdin would say to make some kind of a pshara, because it's always not so clear. Is it, how direct is it? Is it groma or gami? And this case, both in hiring, now the kid now doesn't have a job for the summer, and they rejected offers from other camps. Same thing. The hotel hired a singer, like you said. So it's a different story.
So let me ask you this question. Let's say the hotel hires a singer and they cancel, and the singer can say, hey, I could have gotten another job. Let's say he didn't have any other job offers. Would the hotel still be legally obligated to pay him?
So, this is a question of honesty and dishonesty. Listen, all money matters. People can make up stories and make up claims. And that's why the Mishnah says when the two parties the come before a bezdin, you show. The judges have to suspect them as if they are, Rishayim. Maybe
You're guilty until proven
they're dishonest. Until they accept the din, then they're tzaddikim. These are issues of evidence. These are issues of evidence. In the case of the, let's say the hotel says, if there's nothing written, the hotel can say, I never offered you. Or the person made the reservation, or the director of the camp can say, I didn't really offer you. I was thinking about it. I said this and that. When it comes to legality, it depends on the wording. That's why it's good to have a paper trail. People dealing with camps or reservations, if there's an email, they should have it on email or WhatsApp text messages where you have a paper trail to see the wording of the agreement between them. And there may be
good to have it in writing.
What?
Good to have it in writing.
To have it in writing.
So let me ask you this question. Let's getting back to the camp situation with hiring people to be waiters or counselors. Lots of times states have minimum wage laws, but these camps hire these kids where they're not paying minimum wage. They're paying them a flat fee, usually a small fee, to be there, for the summertime. So halachically, are they allowed to do so? If the law of the land is that they have to pay a minimum wage, are they cheating them out of a fair wage if they pay them a flat fee without disregard to what they pay on an hourly basis?
I think that it would be unfair to criticize the camps in that way, because I think the kids who are going to camp are really volunteers. And what the camp is paying them is not really salary that would be included in the idea of minimum wage. If a kid wants to work, he'll get a job. And he's looking to get by the hour. If he needs the money, then he's going to work in a job that pays really by the hour, a minimum wage. Then it will be an issue of minimum wage or not minimum wage. But the kids want to go in an atmosphere of in a good atmosphere. They're really volunteers. I think that some of the camps are taking advantage of them anyway, but I would consider them volunteers with some stipend or gesture that the camps are giving them for the time that they're working there.
Rav Gabriel, Rav Zusha Winner, the Rosh Yeshiva Lubavitch, Rav Brighton Beach, Mechaber Swarm is also in Bezdin, Dayan. We appreciate your being here with us. If people want to learn more about some of these halachas, there isn't as many svarim and books like you have about kashrus and shmiras Shabbos, but what would you recommend for people to do to learn some more?
There are shirim. There are books that already have been written on halacha and chayshim mishpat. They're online. There are different sites that have translations of Shulchan Aruch. There are plenty of opportunities to learn on many levels. If you go into the Svarim stores today in English language, you have Svarim. The main thing is to study Torah. People should choose to learn areas of halacha where they like. Some people like money matters. Some people like kashrus. Some people like marriage halacha. But I believe that there are opportunities to learn. There are shiurim, and there are svarim, and there are books in English. I mentioned before, Rabbi Herzog wrote, I believe, main institutions in Jewish law, and he was a Gaon Olam in Gemara and in halacha, as well as other areas. And there are many other books out there.
Thank you for being with us, and look forward to having you back again, Rav Zusha Winner.
Zev, Hatzlacha Rabbe in your work, and we should stay in touch.
Amen, amen. And tonight's broadcast is sponsored in part by Righteous Helping. They're looking to help a community father with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt after his business dealings failed, and he's struggling to survive, and Righteous Helping is looking to help him.
Thank you for tuning in to
Talk Line with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast, the pulse beat of the Jewish community.
For continuous Jewish programs, TalkLineNetwork.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the TalkLineNetwork.com.
So,
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
I see you stopped recording. When are you going to